Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are tackling a really fascinating question, and it's one that gets surprisingly personal for a lot of people. It's all based on a paper arguing that kids can have a genuine faith, and it all boils down to one central idea that might just challenge how you think about belief itself.
So here it is, the big question. Can a child truly believe? I mean, really, truly. Our source material lays this out as the fundamental issue. On one hand, our instinct is to protect kids from stuff that's too complicated, but on the other hand, you have these deep theological arguments that say children might actually have a unique, maybe even an ideal capacity for faith. And that's the tension we're going to dig into today. Okay, so first things first, let's explore the case for doubt. Because to really get what the author is trying to say, you've got to understand the viewpoint they're pushing back against. This quote from the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, wow, it just hits the nail on the head for the skeptical argument. His point is that a kid's brain just isn't wired for these huge abstract ideas yet. In his view, they aren't actually believing in a divine concept. They're just believing in the person who told them about it. You see the difference? It's trust in a person, not belief in a principle. And this philosophical idea gets a big-time boost from science, specifically from the world of developmental psychology. Think of Jean Piaget. His theories were hugely influential, and they basically suggest that kids think in very concrete terms. Abstract concepts like sin or grace or salvation, well, Piaget would say a child's brain can't really wrap itself around those ideas until around age 11 or so. So this is where it all comes to a head, right? It's a fundamental disagreement over what belief even is. Is faith basically an intellectual project, a conclusion you arrive at through logic and reason? Or is it something else entirely, a spiritual thing, a matter of trust and relationship that works on a totally different level? This is the exact pivot point the author uses to build their counter-argument. So how does the author fight back against this skeptical view? Well, their argument kicks off by going straight to the source, looking for evidence in Scripture. The paper argues that if you look at the Old Testament, faith wasn't some private, adults-only club. No way. It was this big, communal, multi-generational thing. The point wasn't just to, download a bunch of facts into a kid's brain. The goal was for them to have an experiential knowledge of God. And by including kids in these sacred public rituals, the community expected them to learn reverence and be full participants. Then, the author jumps to the New Testament and points to this quote as the moment everything gets turned on its head. According to the paper, Jesus isn't looking at a child as some incomplete, intellectually lacking version of an adult. Just the opposite. He holds them up as the model for adults to copy. Their simple trust, their dependence, that is presented as the absolute core of what faith is all about. But the author's case doesn't just hang out in ancient times. It comes right into the modern world, bringing in some pretty surprising research and statistics to show that this pattern we see in Scripture, well, it might still be happening today. And then the author presents us with just one stark number, 85%. This figure is pretty much the centerpiece of their statistical argument. So what's the story behind it? That 85%? Get this. According to Barna research, that is the staggering number of adult Christians who say they made their first commitment to their faith sometime between the ages of 4 and 14. It suggests that, whatever the psychological theories might say, childhood is overwhelmingly the time these spiritual journeys begin. And this chart here, it drills down even deeper. If you look at the actual probability of conversion, the data suggests a 32% chance for kids between 5 and 12. But look what happens next. That number absolutely plummets to just 4% for teenagers. The author sees this and calls it a critical window of opportunity, a time when spiritual openness is just at its absolute peak. Okay, so we've seen the skeptical view, which is all about intellectual hurdles, and we've seen the author's counter-arguments, pulling from Scripture and modern stats. So how do they bring it all home? They do it by reframing what we even mean by the word faith. And this brings us right to the heart of the author's whole point. Faith isn't about passing some cosmic theology exam, because as the author argues, if it required perfect, complete understanding, well, no adult would ever qualify, right? Instead, they define it as a spiritual act of trust and relationship. And from that perspective, a child's incredible ability to trust so simply and deeply isn't a weakness. It's actually their greatest spiritual strength. So this whole theological framework isn't just abstract. It leads directly to a very practical game plan. The paper wraps up with these 5 principles for how to talk with children about faith. And you can see it's all about simplicity, making sure they get it,
offering assurance and seeing this as just the beginning of a lifelong journey.
Which leaves us right here with this final massive question that the paper kind of leaves on our doorstep. Yeah, it started by asking if a child can believe, but it ends up challenging all of us. If faith isn't just about what you can master with your intellect, then what is the real measure of belief? Not just in a child, but in any of us. It's a question that gets at the very nature of conviction itself.